Here live.
Hello, welcome to Garibaldi Red as we discuss another fine Forest and another fine Monday morning to be a Red supporter. They are up to 7th in the Championship, 1 point outside the playoffs, but with games on hand on all in hand on all the teams above them after a 4-1 win against Blackpool at the weekend. And to discuss that and look ahead to game against Coventry, we're joined first of all by BBC Radio Nottingham's main football presenter, David Jackson. Hello, David, you well?
I'm very well now, thank you. Yes, after a couple of weeks of not being well, but I'm very well now and greatly cheered by being able to watch that performance at the weekend, which I think was enough to put a smile on anybody's face.
Yes, we're glad to have you back after a bout of COVID, if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know, football managers don't say what's wrong with people if they've got COVID. Does the BBC do that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm not bothered. I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I think half the population has got it. But you're right, football managers don't do they? Quite often they just say, oh, it's a bout of illness that's just going through the camp. And you think, well, I wonder what illness that could be. It's a mystery. And then the players are missing at the weekend, but we're not allowed to sort of question maybe what it is. But hey, that's their prerogative, I guess, isn't it? And probably GDPR's got something to do with it. But I can exclusively tell you, yes, I had COVID. There we go. If anyone really is that interested.
Well, yes, good to have you back off the bench. And our second guest today has his own experiences of COVID. Are we allowed to say, Mikey, that your wife had COVID and you've been nursing her, Mikey Clarke?
Yeah, hi Matt. Yeah, she's been quite poorly. I haven't had it. I have had it before, but obviously not now. But I just look tired because I'm overworked and underpaid, basically. Yeah. There you go. I'm happy with the Forest stuff, so that's good. That's cheering me up.
Well, if anyone's watching this on YouTube, my lighting is terrible because my laptop's updated, so I'll get that fixed for next week. But anyway, let's get into the game. When I sent out my pre-show notes to you guys, I said, was it the best performance in the league this season without giving it any consideration myself? And I still haven't. So, David, I'll pass the bat to you and you can tell us where it ranks.
It's got to be up there, mainly because they actually played so well in the first half, I think, because quite often we've seen bits of great performances, haven't we? And I was thinking back to games like, I don't know, Reading, and Reading were no opposition, but, they've scored early and then they've been brilliant for the entire of the second half and scored 3 more goals. But for the rest of that first half, weren't as good. Maybe the QPR game as well. They've gone behind, they've come back, played brilliantly again in the second half. Think of the Derby game. I thought they played really well in the Derby game, but then have kind of let it down slightly at the end. Cup-wise, of course, they were outstandingly disciplined and played brilliantly well against Arsenal. Then there was the fantastic all-round performance against Leicester. But in the league, I think this was so impressive, mainly because it was away from home, against a team who have had some decent results against good teams in the league as well, by the way, this season, Blackpool. And we made them look very, very ordinary. Forest made them look really, really ordinary. And of course, they scored 3 goals in the first half, could also have had a penalty, scored another one second half, but again, could have had more. Great substitutions again from Steve Cooper, which just gave it that extra bit of life just maybe when you needed it. So I think all round, that has to be up there as one of the better performances this season. And it was so pleasing to see, and I was hoping to see them start brightly and do well in the first half, because you just thought, having lost to Liverpool just before the international break, I was talking to Colin Frey about it, and we said we could just imagine them coming back and setting off like a train now. Losing to Liverpool may end up being the best thing that could have happened to them. They've now got this run in, they've got 10 games, and you thought, this Forest team under Steve Cooper, the sort of team that would just get going straight away, set off well in this game, and just really make a statement of intent. And they did it. And they lived up to every expectation. And they not only scored 4 goals, they scored 4 really good goals, really well-worked goals. Even the goal, you could argue they were given with Brennan Johnson. He's done really well then to take the last defender on and a clever little chip to score. So they've scored great goals. They've looked solid at the back. You've had the bonus of McKenna coming in and playing really well. So it has to be up there as one of the better league performances this season. Whether it is the best, I guess, is can remain open to debate. But it's got to be up there for all those reasons. And it was just so much fun to watch. And so a friend of mine I was watching it with just said, I felt relaxed all the way through. I never once felt worried. And as a Forest fan, that's quite unusual, isn't it? But he just said, I never once felt concerned that anything was going to go wrong. And that says everything about the way they're playing at the moment, but particularly the way that they played in that game.
It's interesting, Mikey, in the comments, there's a couple of people, Glenn and Gary, saying that Forest didn't play within themselves, that there was more to come. I can kind of see what they're saying in an attacking sense, but just without the ball as well, Forest were right up there with anyone in the league, I thought. What did you make of it overall?
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. I agree with what David's saying as well. I think we controlled the game. I think that's probably a good phrase to use. Controlled the game. We were very clinical as well. In terms of level of performance, the Huddersfield game where we lost at home 1-0 and absolutely battered them, that was up there. But we lost the game. I know which one I prefer, to be honest with you. No, I just thought on Saturday we were excellent. We started really, really quickly, as David said. What made me laugh is, Blackpool have had 2 weeks to figure out how to stop our right-hand side. And then in the first half an hour, we scored 3 goals all coming down that side, which made me laugh a little bit. But yeah, I think it was a really good performance. And I did like the way they managed the game. You guys were saying around somebody being nervous watching Forest, and I often find myself looking at the clock thinking, if we can get to 60 minutes or if we can get to 65, and then we can maybe bring Cafu on, and that's not a phrase I say very often, something like that, in order to manage the game. But honestly, on Saturday, I totally agree. I wasn't nervous in the slightest, even when they were launching balls into the box, and that Josh Bowler's a very, very good player. I just thought we had another gear. I thought we had it under control. The fourth goal was absolutely lovely. It was almost like we clicked up a gear and then we sort of sat off again. And it was just a very controlled, clinical performance. And I guess what I would say as well is, if you look at the stats, if you didn't watch that game and you looked at the stats and you didn't know the score, you'd probably say, oh, there might be a goal in it either way because it's pretty close. I think they had 10% more possession, shots pretty even. And that just shows you how clinical we were, and how we sort of, like I said, controlled the game. And if you watch, I watched a bit of Premier League football yesterday. Nothing happens for half an hour, and then you get 1 or 2 chances and they stick them away. And it felt a bit like that on Saturday. So yes, we set off like a train, but I always felt if we got a chance, we'd score. And that bodes really well, actually. So like I said, I'd rather have 7 or 8 shots and score 4 goals than have 30 shots against Huddersfield and don't score. So, I was really pleased with what I saw on Saturday. I'm sure everybody was.
I suppose there's 2 players to talk about before we get into the game itself who made a big difference coming back. I mean, McKenna ahead of schedule, David, that felt kind of essential to me. I think they need those 3 centre-backs, whether it's Figueiredo, Worrell, McKenna, and then Cook, a combination of those 3 to go up. I think they probably needed them back sooner rather than later. So McKenna was tremendous again, wasn't he, David?
Yeah, we're getting used to players coming back slightly earlier than scheduled.
That's not very Forest thing either, is it? Normally they say, "Oh, he's going to be back in 2 weeks," and then they don't play again for the club. But
yeah, we've had that a couple of times with Steve Cooper, haven't we? Players are going to be out for 6 weeks and then appear maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and it just feels like it's quite a good way of doing it, really, because then when they do come back, suddenly it feels like such a bonus. Nobody's really talked about the possibility of McKenna being back in the build-up to it, and then suddenly the team news comes out, and you think, oh, okay, because Colin Freyo was at the game, he messaged me before, and I went, I've just seen McKenna here, and you thought, oh, this is great news, just after the international break. And the manager's been talking about the possibility of Lewis Grabman being back and saying he's been back in training that week, but said that Blackpool might be too soon, and you thought, well, that probably means he'll be on the bench, doesn't it? And then you've got suddenly McKenna thrown back in as well. But yeah, I thought McKenna, you're right, I way prefer that back 3 for so many reasons. One, I just think it's an intimidating prospect for anyone coming up against those 3, especially when Cook's in there as well. Worrell's playing tremendously well at the moment, isn't he? And McKenna's just brilliant in the back. And Steve Cook was so consistent. Figueiredo in a 3, I much prefer to Figueiredo in a 2. And then, of course, the added advantage of that is it allows Jed Spence to go forward so much more. Because, when he's in a back 4, and we saw it against Liverpool, where certainly for the first half, he was reluctant to get too far forward. And you can see why. He's got to hold the line. He's got to hold that position. But when you've got a back 3, he's got so much freedom to get forwards. And it just makes Forest so much a better attacking threat. So I like it for all those reasons. And I thought McKenna was tremendous. And the way I mean, possibly should have given away a penalty in the second half. And the more I watched that, at first I didn't think it was, and the more I watched it, I thought, actually, yeah, fair enough, it was. But his reading of the game to intercept the ball and to lay the pass then for Surridge. Surridge was outstanding, by the way, just to take a slight step to the right, just to give himself that extra yard. But McKenna to lay a perfect 30-yard pass on the floor into him for that fourth goal just shows how much he's developed as a player. Not only is he a rock at the back, but he brings a lot into the attack as well. We've seen him do that a bit. I remember, I think it was it Birmingham away, I think, when he went skipping down the left wing and laid a pass in and ended up leading to Jed Spencer's goal. So we're seeing him do that more and more, and it's something Cooper wants from him. But you see the advantage of having him in the team at that point, because he's ready. He's had the confidence to take that step past the defender, bring it out. And there was a couple of players he could have passed to, short passes. And he thought, no, I'm going for the jugular, straight for that pass inside right. And you see this big cheer on the halfway line when Surrey just scored. And yeah, I thought he was brilliant. It's a big, strong, solid defender. But, just don't forget the attacking threat that he poses as well, because that pass was absolutely outstanding.
That's a good point about Figs as well, isn't it, Mikey? I mean, I still think he's got a mistake in him, and he probably will, give away a goal before the end of the season. But he's come back and been tremendous. And like David says, the license they have to attack with that three, I'm much more. I mean, you talk about nerves. I'm much more comfortable watching them in a 3 than I am in a 4. What about you?
Yeah, totally agree. To be honest with you, I much prefer 3 at the back with the squad that we have. I was never really a fan of it, probably up until we started playing it. If I'm being honest, looking at other teams, the way they play it never really appealed to me. But I think you play the system that suits your players. And I think with the 3 or 4 centre backs we've got, or maybe even 5 if you include Embisser, maybe 6 Panzer, I suppose. You've got a real solid centre back base. And if there's a better loanee in the Championship than Jed Spence, I've yet to see it. So if you can set up a system that gets the best out of him, it's pretty much a no-brainer for me. I think going back to Figs, I did like it when he bashed the ground at the end, a bit of angry Figs coming back there from Garibaldi. Love that. It does have a bit of a mistake in him, but I guess they all do. But I guess when you're with Worrell and Cook, or as you say McKenna, it gives me, and I'm sure a lot of fans, a bit more a view of security, that those 3 are always sort of behind the ball, and it does allow them to step out. If you remember England back in the World Cup when Southgate started playing that 3 at the back, he encouraged Maguire and Stones and everybody just to step out. I think probably because he thought that we didn't necessarily have the control in the midfield. So I love to see that, and I love to see central defenders stepping into that midfield zone and drawing the attackers onto them as well to release that space. So it's very easy. A back 3 can become a back 5 very, very easily when you're under the cosh. But I haven't really seen that from Forest in the last couple of weeks, and hopefully, I won't see much of it for the next sort of 1 or 2 months, depending on whether we get in the playoffs or not. So I think it's the right system for us. I think it gets the best out of our players. Those 3 centre-backs at the back, I mean, they're tough, aren't they? You wouldn't want to go against them. 3 massive, strong as oxes centre-backs. It does really, really bode well. And like I say, it gets the best out of the supporting players around them. So, long may it continue. Let's keep playing that. Let's hope we don't get Borough in the playoffs, by the way. But that's a different conversation.
Yes, absolutely right. Borough without Spence in the team, that's the big problem, isn't it? Whether you play them in the semis or the final, that's an issue. I agree with you.
It is. That's
it. Well, they might miss out. I mean, that's a conversation for later. But Borough might miss out. It's going to be an interesting thing. Do you think the goalkeeper situation is not settled? But do you suspect now, David, that I've always felt Samba's the number 1? Really, do you think he's going to play the rest of the season?
I always thought he might want to bring Brice Samba back at some point, and I wasn't quite sure how he was going to do it, because I think Horvath did everything he could have done. I thought at first, thinking back to the Preston away game as well, where he just looked a little nervy on the ball. And he was making some good saves still, and he made a couple of really important saves in that game. But in terms of the role that you have to play these days as a goalkeeper in that Forest team, where you required almost to be a sweeper keeper and bring the ball out and be that extra defender sometimes, he looked a little uneasy with that at times at first. thought he got a bit more used to it as it went on. And I think maybe leaving Brice Samba out then, even after his suspension was over, sort of sent a little bit of a message. It sent a message to Ethan Horvath to give him the confidence that you've done a good job and you deserve to keep your place in the team. It maybe sent a message to Brice Samba as well to say, look, once you get back in, you are going to have to not only continue to play well, but you need to cut out the silliness, which has obviously led to his suspension. And I think then after the international break, and Horvath's obviously been away, it's just given maybe Steve Cooper a chance to say, okay, here's your place back, keep it. And Brice Samba, when he's at his best, is the best keeper in the division, probably. In terms of his character and everything as well, he not only brings brilliant shot stopping, brilliant control of his area when he just plucks the ball out of the air one-handed. Love all of that. Love the showmanship. Love all of the I better not use the word that I would normally use, but
no.
You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. The wind-up merchant side to him, shall we say. And I think everybody loves all that side to him as well. But it was just boiling over at times. And he has to be really careful of that. You've got to know where the line is. And if he knows where the line is and you can get the best out of him, then he's an outstanding keeper to have. So I think if you can play him and you can have him at his best, I think you'd want him as your number one. And I think it does. I think if Horvath was to play game after game after game, you'd probably see that confidence grow in the defenders as well. But at the moment, I feel like there's extra confidence from the defenders when Samba's playing. There's something about having him behind them when he's playing well that they just seem to have this extra layer of confidence in just being able to knock the ball back to him and knowing that he's gonna be relaxed about bringing the ball under control and laying a pass. Just because Horvath probably hasn't done that much before. That's all it is. Just that Samba's done it a lot and it's very natural to him. I feel Horvath could get to that stage, but it would take a number of games for him to do that because it's probably not what he's done before. So yeah, I always kind of felt maybe he'd come back in, and it's not a massive surprise that he's back now for the run-in.
Briefly on that one, Mikey, the clock's running along today. We've got a lot to get through.
Probably my fault. Sorry. I've been stuck in the house for so long. Any opportunity to talk, and I'm taking it.
What are you saying, Mikey? Samba or Horvath for the rest of the season?
Samba, big fan of Samba. I think he's the best keeper in the league, if I'm being honest with you. I think all keepers are supposed to be a bit mad, aren't they? So, if you think back in the day, Grobbelaar, keepers like that. So, he's the best keeper I've seen down the City ground probably since Crosley, I would have thought. So, I've yet to see a better one than him, and I know he's got that in him. But hopefully, as David said, it's a bit of time out of the team. He gets to reset a little bit. He comes back in for the last 9 or 10 games, proves how good he is. Just one more thing on Samba, Matt. You're absolutely right about defensive security with him in. So, when he rolls his foot on top of the ball, you can almost see the centre-back sort of relax and spread out. Not necessarily the way with some of our other keepers who just hoof it. He's got that distribution. It's brilliant. It's Premier League distribution, and I think everybody knows that. So when he's got the ball at his feet, you can see them relaxing their body language, and he's a cracking keeper as well. So I'd always play Samba.
The next thing I wanted to talk about, we've hammered refs on this podcast this season, not in previous seasons, but I feel like this season it feels like Stan's been awful. It was a fascinating performance from the ref on Saturday, I thought. It wasn't quite like Kenny Burns couldn't have played in the game in his prime, but he let plenty go. I think both sides should have had a penalty, really. He missed both of those, but at least he was consistent. I quite liked it. What did you make of it, David? Jared Gillett was.
I liked it as well. I agree. He did miss the 2 penalties. I agree with you. And it was clearly a foul on Zinkernagel, although weirdly nobody claimed it.
No.
Zinkernagel just sort of put his hand up very slightly on his way out, which made me think, maybe it wasn't. And then you watch the replay and think, yeah, okay, it was. And I think maybe McKenna had thought by later on, actually, you can do what you like in this game, so maybe it's okay. And he was right. He judged it right. It's just to maybe give him a little bit too much credit for that one. But I quite liked it. Like you say, it was consistent. It helped the game flow. It meant it wasn't all stop-start constantly. The thing I find with refs a lot this season is the advantage rule seems to baffle them. I think quite often you just sort of think, well, just play advantage here. And they don't. And then the next time they go, oh, I remember the advantage rule. And then they sort of play an advantage, and well, that's not an advantage now, is it? And it's quite a simple thing, I'd have thought, but you quite often see that go wrong. But yeah, I liked it. I liked it the weekend. Like you say, it's a bit of a throwback to if you ever watch the Big Match Revisited on ITV4, and you see these awful challenges go in. And the commentators saying, "Oh, it's been a bit harsh for a booking," and you think, he'd be sent off in a 10-game ban these days. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the openness of it, and it actually both teams just seemed to embrace it and say, "Well, fair enough. If that's the way we're playing, let's just go for it, and let's just get on with it." And it made it a very entertaining game. Liked it.
And it was never the case, Mikey, that tackles are flying in with leg breakers or anything. It was just a good competitive game, I thought, wasn't it?
It was, and it was like the Old Firm game yesterday. If anybody watched that, it was just sort of back and forth, and the ref letting it go. What made me laugh is after about 10 minutes, I said to my wife, "I wonder what you have to do to get a free kick in this game," because it was one of them. And then I'm sure I can say this, Matt, on our WhatsApp group, you put, "Is this game being played in 1972?" I think.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Which made me laugh. But do you know what? I'd rather watch a game like that, which is allowed to flow, than a ref who's sort of whistle happy and stops it for every little bit of contact. People watching and listening to this might think of a bit of a downer on Premier League football, but I don't really. But when you watch that, it's like netball. It's like a non-contact sport. As soon as you brush against an individual that goes down, it's an automatic free kick. This was literally the other end of the scale, and I know which one I'd rather watch. And it really helped with the flow of the game. Certainly in that first half, you got two teams that haven't played for 2 weeks, bundles of energy. They're all fired up. Don't keep stopping it after every 30 seconds. Let it flow. And I thought the game was all the better for that. And it's no surprise to me that you saw shots on target. You saw numerous goals. You saw, goal line scrambles. It was a great game, and the ref deserves a hell of a lot of credit. I really hope he's reffing some of our future games, to be honest with you, because, the tone was set very early on. And I think the Sky commentator said, "Well, let's just hope he's consistent." And to be fair, he was. So, the players would have known that after 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm not surprised he didn't give any of those penalties. God knows what you would have had to have done to get a penalty in that game. Who knows? But like I said, I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure most people that watched it would rather see that than, some of the stuff was served up in the top league, to be honest.
True. So Forest went into the break 3-0 up, having scored 3 very good goals in different ways. Brennan Johnson, David, the quality of play and finishing is outstanding. I think it's fair to assume that if Forest don't go up, he's going to the Premier League. You'd be naive not to think that. I suppose the question now is, what level of Premier League club would he be going to? How good is he, do you think, now?
Well, he's as good a player as I remember seeing in recent years, largely for his consistency as well. And also he's making a lot of very sensible decisions now. I liked the quick pass into Zinkernagel for the first goal. He saw a pass and just laid it in straight away from the right wing, perfect, straight into feet. I thought that was really lovely. Didn't dwell on the ball, didn't try and do anything too fancy. He saw a pass, and actually he had to get that pass absolutely right to get in between two defenders straight into the feet of Zinkernagel in a pretty crowded area, but did it perfectly to set up that. And yeah, his 2 goals were really, really good finishes. So yeah, I think he's very good. It surprised me a little bit that all the talk seemed to be about Brentford signing him at the time, because I thought, well, I think he could be a slightly more established Premier League club than that, really. But the question is, if he goes to a bigger Premier League club, how much football is he going to play? And that's then the decision for him and his family and his agent to make, I suppose. If he did go to Brentford, he'd be playing regularly in the Premier League. If he went to a Spurs, say, then is he going to have to sort of bide his time and wait? And is that the most sensible move? Ideally, obviously, Forest to get promoted, he'd play regularly in the Premier League next season, and then we'll see where his career takes him from there. But I don't know. It's tough. I think that's the question for me. It's just how much football does he want to play? If he's going to go to a Chelsea, then he's not going to be playing every week, is he? Barely any player gets to play every week at Chelsea. So does he want that, or does he want to sort of be at the moment when he's playing so well and he's so young? Does he really need to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and go and play regularly and build up to the level that he can be, rather than sort of settling for a bit part player at a bigger club? I think a lot of bigger clubs would probably consider now taking him, certainly if he had a year in the Premier League and proved he can do it there as well. But it's how much he'd play. So I think it comes down to his choice in the end, really, as to how much he wants to play.
I mean, hopefully Forest go up and negates the conversation, although you wouldn't even rule that out now he's playing that well if the money's on the table. Which goal was best, Mikey, of the, well, I say four, for the latter three, which one do you think would you vote for?
Oh, that's really tough, and I keep changing my mind. I would probably go for Johnson's first goal, although I can understand why people wouldn't and go for the others, because they all have defining qualities about them. I think what I liked about Johnson's first strike was he didn't even think about it. It was almost came natural to him, and the sweetness that he hit the ball. You saw the ball hit the side of the net and keep spinning. He obviously sort of put some, I think it's some top spin or whatever on it. Absolutely smashed it past the keeper. That is a Premier League finish if ever I saw one. And then obviously he does the same again with a little dink. He's a serious footballer, and he will be, and he will go right to the top level. I think Johnson. I think he's that good. But in terms of the goals, it's like what you said at the start, Matt. 4 outstanding goals in their own way. The first one had a bit of luck about it, but the sweet passing to create that chance was really nice. But the other 3, wow, brilliant stuff. You know, other teams watching that must be a bit scared of that and thinking, you know, we don't want Forest in the playoffs if they get in there, because they're capable of that away from home. They're capable of ripping up a team that had a brilliant home record, Blackpool, and we made them look ordinary in the first half an hour, certainly. One of the comments on here, I always like reading the comments when we're doing this live. It was from Karen, who put, I don't know what the Blackpool manager was watching, thinking they, you know, deserve something. I can kind of only assume that he thought it was still April Fool's Day from the day before, because it was such a bizarre comment. But there you go. But that's kind of, you know, he probably has to say that for his own fans to try and keep some positivity. But I thought, you know, in general, all 4 goals had their own, you know, brilliant qualities about them. But that strike from Brennan for the first one, my word, you know, if he hits balls like that, he's going to score a hell of a lot of goals for the remaining 10 games of the season. Brilliant stuff. Can't speak highly enough of it, Matt.
Well, I really like the 4th goal for Surridge, because you want strikers to do that, finish like that and come off the bench. I mean, if I had to pick, I'd say Johnson's first goal for the passing quality of the team move. But it's a great discussion to have, isn't it, David? I mean, you were discussing your post-match Facebook lives with, you know, Steve Hodge or whoever, discussing an absolutely boring 0-0 against whoever pre Steve Cooper is. We'd much rather be talking about this.
They were hard work. They were hard work. Got to be honest. Let's talk for half an hour about a 0-0 draw. And you go, oh, you know, when they almost maybe created one chance at some point, and now suddenly we're deciding which of the 4 goals away from home was the best. And I have to say as well, by the way, they've scored 4 goals away from home on a day when Blackpool kept Keenan Davies quiet. You know, because Keenan Davies, nothing really stuck at Keenan Davies. It's the first time really I've seen this happen with him, because I think it's been absolutely outstanding and a pleasure to watch. But this time it just didn't quite stick with him, and I thought they marshalled him really well. And so you've got Forest 1 centre forward largely kept quiet during the game, and they've still scored 4, which just shows what a threat Forest are. They've got so many different threats that even if they can keep one quiet, it's like spinning plates. You know, they've managed to do one job, and they've done it pretty well with Keenan, and then they've not been able to stop anybody else. I have to say, the one that I keep watching over, the goal from the weekend that I keep watching over, would be the 4th, just because I really love Surridge's movement. I'm really liking watching Sam Surridge at the moment. The last few weeks, by the way, he's averaging a goal every 45 minutes. In terms of the amount of minutes he's actually playing, which just shows how well he's playing at the minute. And I saw a guy from Radio Stoke, who I know, the other week, and he cannot believe what he's seeing when he's seeing Forest play. He's like, how has this happened? But this is what Steve Cooper does, isn't it? He manages to get more out of players than maybe they've been able to to do at other clubs, because he knows what their strengths are, he knows how to use them. And seeing him come off the bench, you could see him and Lewis Grabban coming off the bench, and at that point I felt sorry for Blackpool, because I just thought, Forest have already scored 3, and now you're bringing on a striker who's been scoring goals lately and is hungry for goals in Sam Surridge, and Lewis Grabban, who always scores goals at this level and is clearly desperate to get back in the goals as well. You could see that when he came on, when at one point he maybe should have passed but went for goal instead, and because they sensed there were more goals in it. But that 4th goal, just seeing Surridge, who was not expecting the ball to come back at him, but he just took a step just to give himself an extra yard. The brilliant interception from McKenna, the drive, the fact that they're 3-0 up at that point, but they're so determined to still get a 4th. The quality of the pass from McKenna, the first touch from Surridge is absolutely outstanding. Exactly where he'd want to take it, still keeping the defender at bay, and then to smash it right into the bottom corner. It's a beautiful, beautiful goal. I know that sometimes great goals, when it's like the 4th that a team scores, that you can just say, oh yeah, well, the game's over by then or whatever. But I don't care. I think it was a really beautiful goal. And the fact that it just showed the drive of the team to keep pushing and keep scoring more goals, and that it was Surridge just off the bench. The quality of that touch, the quality of the pass, it was just lovely.
I tell you what, reminded me, I'm going way back here. Do you remember when Arsenal under Wenger battered Everton 4-1 and Tony Adams scored, and he brought the ball out and he finished? But to see McKenna bringing the ball out and playing with that confidence, and Surridge finishing like Ian Wright, I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but to see a Forest team playing that vibrantly is fantastic. And then you see, like you said, David, you've got Grabban coming off the bench, Surridge, Lolly. I mean, the depth of the squad now, Mikey, must give you, further confidence that Forest are going to be in this till the end of the season.
Yeah, it does. Plenty of options there. I think, just quickly going back to what you guys were saying around attacking intent, I noticed there was a free kick near the end of the game. Worrell was taking it, and he stopped and he shouted 5. And I thought, what's he saying? And I looked, and there were 5 players in a line up front, and we were 3 or 4 goals up at that time. So remember, Cooper, when he took over, talked about not just attacking with 2 or 3 players, having 5, and it shows that intent that even when the game's won, we're still getting players in 4 positions. I think under a previous manager, should I say, you'd be lucky to even have a centre forward showing for the ball from a free kick, to be honest with you. So that is really refreshing, and that goes on top of what you guys were saying. But I think in terms of options, Matt, from the bench, you think of the players that didn't get a sniff, so Mighton, Silva, players like that. There's some serious options there now, and people are coming back to fitness at a key time in the season. So, you're not going to play these next 9 games plus a potential 3 more with the same 11, 12, 13 players. It just won't happen, because we've got a bit of a fixture pile up. We've got the Bournemouth and Fulham fixtures, to squeeze in there as well. You're going to have to rely on this squad, and it's so refreshing to see them coming on, making an impact. The options that Cooper has are really quite frightening for this level now, especially when they're performing at the level that they are performing. So, we've got, Coventry and Birmingham, a couple of home games in the next few days. If he brings in a Surridge, as David was saying, or a Joe Lolly, or a Alex Mighton, or a Silva, you wouldn't worry about it, because they're all chomping at the bit. And, if things don't work for the first hour, he can then bring on a Lewis Grabban or bring Keenan Davies back on or whatever. So there's some serious options there. I remember Forest teams in the past, I'm sure everybody does, where there was literally nothing. If the first 11, and they were shoddy sometimes, the first 11 didn't do it, there's barely anything from the bench. Now it's completely different. So that will give fans a lot of heart for the remaining, sort of 9 games of the season, plus playoffs, hopefully, that we will find ways to win games. If the starting 11 isn't working, we can tweak it, and we have those options. And that is really, like I said, quite frightening for the opposition, I would have thought.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Davies on the bench on Wednesday. David, would maybe Grabban come straight back in, or Surridge, just to refresh it a little bit with a home game against Coventry and then a home game against Birmingham to come, do you think?
I mean, he might do. And Absolutely, I agree with Mikey. You wouldn't worry if he did. He may well do that. I wonder about, whether he might start to use Graben in the number 10 as well. He's had Zinkernagel, and when he's left Zinkernagel out at times before and pushed Garner up there, but now he's suddenly got all these other different options. I think he'll probably be a bit more cautious with Graben. But yeah, he could put Surridge up there, and I think Surridge would fully deserve it. When he started last time out, he had one goal ruled out early on, didn't he, against Huddersfield, and then got one that was allowed, which was a really nice finish. And I really like him. I really like him as a player. And yeah, with 2 home games, he may well decide to do that. That said, you don't know, because Keenan's had a frustrating game at the weekend. You don't know whether you sort of want to put him in again next time and say, right, go on then, have another one of those games where you make a massive impact on it and a massive influence. You could almost see him after having a frustrated day at the weekend. You could almost see him going out and scoring on Wednesday night. So that's one only he knows that he can manage. But like Mikey, I wouldn't worry whoever he decides to play up front. If he goes for Keenan, then you know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get a big, strong, powerful, hard-working performance, and possibly a goal. If you play Surridge, I wouldn't bet against him scoring either. I just think they've got so many options at the moment, and they look such a threat in so many different areas of the field. And it's extraordinary that we're saying this in the same season as a season in which, they picked up 1 point from the first 7 games when they looked like they'd entirely forgotten how to score. And yet here we are just saying it doesn't matter who they play, they'll score regardless. But that's kind of how you feel. And that's what Steve Cooper's now got to manage, to sort of keep all those players hungry, give them, I guess, enough of a game every now and again to sort of keep them in there, give them that opportunity to show that they deserve a place, and just keep that interest around the squad without them getting too frustrated that they're not playing regularly. And if we can do that, then over the next few weeks they'll all be continuing to contribute.
Just briefly, a couple of things. Who's Gavin, Mikey? You put in the private chat comments between us. Thanks, Gavin. Is that a work message you've errantly put in here?
Me and technology are awful. So I'm looking at the comments on our live stream, and Gavin's put, "Well said, Mikey." So I just thought I'd be kind and say cheers, mate.
You can't respond to this stream. Thanks, Gavin, who's watching.
Thanks,
I
Gavin.
can read that. Just briefly on strikers, because I'm conscious of the time, and Mikey, you've got to leave at a certain point to go to Leeds. Lyle Taylor scored again for Birmingham, 4 goals and an assist in 9 games. Is he doing anything more than just making it more likely that he leaves Forest because he's becoming more attractive to other clubs, do you think, Mikey? Or is there a route back for him?
I don't think so. I think he obviously gets on very, very well with Lee Bowyer. His previous relationship at Charlton there suggested that. Scored a lot of goals for them. I think Birmingham were in for him before they actually got him. So, and he's obviously enjoying it there. And do you know what? When David was talking about the Stoke correspondent, can't believe how Surridge is kind of settled in here. It's probably a bit similar to Taylor. He's probably not suited to the way Steve Cooper plays. I think that's kind of obvious. Hasn't really hit the ground running with Forest. Goes to Birmingham. They're a little bit more direct. He has a great relationship with their manager, and he's scoring goals for them. And the fans have really taken to him. If you read, some of the comments and so forth. So I think it's probably good for all parties. If you keep scoring for those guys, there's a route there if they want to sort of take him on. I can't see him back at Forest, regardless of what division we're in, guys. If I'm honest with you, I don't know whether you guys agree. I think this is a solution that suits everybody.
Yeah, I
think I agree with you, Mikey. I think, I like him. You can see that he works hard when he's out there playing, and I'm pleased for him that it's going well where it is at Birmingham, and that's great. Good luck to him, because I think sometimes it just takes a move. Sometimes there's just a certain manager, a certain style, a certain club where things fit, and you play well, you liked, and it goes well. He's probably, when he looks back on it, he'll probably consider it as quite unlucky that he was at Forest at a time when they weren't creating many chances. He wasn't playing that much football. I thought when he scored the goal against Coventry on the opening day with that lovely cross from Brennan Johnson, and I thought maybe we'll start to see a bit more from Lyle Taylor, because it was no good playing him where, like he was so often at Forest, where he's got his back to goal, trying to hold it up. It just never worked. It just didn't suit him at all, and I felt really sorry for him in that situation. And I felt that if we'd played a bit more to Lyle Taylor's strengths, we might have got more out of him. But I think at the moment he's not going to get in ahead of the strikers Forest have got. And if he's somewhere else where it's going well, then I think fair enough. You let him go, and it's not necessarily a slight on him. You just say fair enough. Like you said, he knows the manager well from his Charlton days. Good luck to him, and and you move on. And Forest have got now a couple of younger strikers as well. Hungry to make their name in the game, and we just go from there, really.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want to block the pathway of a Larson or a Swan if they're deemed good enough, personally. Penultimate topic. People in the chat, this wasn't on our show notes that I sent out, but people on the chat are talking about whether Forest should finish second. So they're 11 points behind Bournemouth with 9 games to go. Bournemouth matches are quite brutal, actually. They've got West Brom away, Sheffield United away, Middlesbrough at home, Coventry away, Fulham at home, Swansea away, and then they've got Blackburn away, Forest and Millwall. I mean, they're all teams in the top half apart from Swansea, I think. Do you think it's come a bit too late, Davies, or can we even dream of second?
I know you said they're quite brutal, but I think if you're Bournemouth, I don't think you're worried about going to West Brom, are you?
No, and Forest would have to win every single game, I think, to do it. But people are discussing it. I just can't see it personally. I think if there was another 5 games, then maybe, but...
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it's too late for that. There was a few games ago, Steve Hodge was talking about second a couple of months ago, but he would have taken, because I think Bournemouth having a bit of a stumble at that point. But then Forest, I think, drew a couple, and Bournemouth wouldn't. He thought, no, it's gone now. I think it's too late for that, really, from Forest's point of view. I know they've got. I mean, the other thing is they've got games in hand on teams above them, but they haven't got games in hand on them. It's too late for that. But also, I don't think you should almost be aiming for that, because that as soon as you start thinking about that, then playoffs starts to feel like a secondary thing. And actually, playoffs is an unbelievable achievement. To be where Forest were earlier in the season, and to even have a chance now of getting into the playoffs is absolutely unbelievable. The advantage Forest have got at the moment on those other teams going for playoffs is goal difference, because their goal difference now is fantastic. So whether that means it'll just see them creep into the playoffs, or whether it'll see them get home advantage in the second leg, that kind of thing. So I think that's brilliant. I think the problem Forest might have is that some of their fixtures, Fulham away, Bournemouth away, in tough midweeks, and I know people have said, well, they might be promoted by then. Like, yeah, maybe, but still, a nicely relaxed Fulham at home on a Tuesday night when they're already promoted and playing against Forest, that those games can go wrong. I also don't think you want to be going away from home on the last day of the season needing something, even though that is to Hull, where you'd expect to win. You don't want to be going there. So the number of points that Forest need, I think they sort of need to be getting quite quickly, because that last couple of weeks looks a little bit tricky. So I think that's why I was so pleased they started so well at the weekend. I think you're wanting to get 6 points out of this week. Let's see what happens at Luton. I think you'd need to then sort of be beating West Brom. I think they need to get those points in as early as possible. I don't really want to see Forest going into the last couple of weeks needing, 7-8 points from the last 3 or 4 games. I think that you don't want that. That's the last thing we need. Yeah,
I agree. I wouldn't want to get carried away. I mean, to get in the playoffs, like you say, would be an unbelievable achievement. And Mikey, Forest have won an inordinate amount of games recently and climbed about 3 places. It's so hard to... I mean, it's not impossible. Bournemouth could lose 4 of their next 6 games, but I think we'd be getting a bit ahead of ourselves if we start dreaming of second, would we?
Yeah, I mean, you can always dream, but I think realistically, as David said, if you would have offered us a playoff place after, 7 or 8 games, we would have first off laughed and then bit your hand off. So I don't think you can get, too greedy. I seem to remember a Billy Davies team finishing 3rd, and I remember feeling a bit down. So I think, David, you've hit a good point there, mate, because you don't want to be any negative feeling or anything in terms of we could have got more. I think Forest are the form team at the moment. We're on a roll. I don't want anything to stop that. So if we finish middle of the playoffs, brilliant. Bring it on. What I will say though is Greg, who's sometimes on this podcast, I'm sure has us finishing second by a 6-point cushion. So he thinks we'll win every single game against anyone. So there are fans out there that still think we can finish second. And do you know what? We might be back on here in a month, 3 points off with 3 games to play, thinking, oh my word, we could do it. And if we can, brilliant. But let's just be a little bit realistic at the moment and, aim for those playoffs. And if we get in, then it's absolutely wonderful. And then got to try and win it. There's no point being in it if we're not going to try and win it, because you're also not level pegging next season. So let's get in there and try and win the thing.
True. Last point, just to finish on quickly. FA Youth Cup tonight at 7:00 at the City Ground. If you're listening to this on Monday, as it comes out against Chelsea and their future string of loan players in League 2 and the Championship and League 1 in coming years. A tough game, obviously, but David, it's great to see this kind of production line is expanding ever more, isn't it? It feels like the club's in a good place at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so good to get to go and see the youth teams at Forest, because you are genuinely seeing first team players of the future, because Forest have got this proven track record of actually bringing those players through and into the first team. It hasn't always been the case, and certainly isn't the case at many clubs. But at Forest, you go and see these players, and there's every chance that the players that you see and think, okay, he looks good. There's a chance that in a few years you'll see them in the first team. And to get to see those players grow and develop and become first team players is a joy, isn't it? And then when you get to see them in the first team, if you've been there, seeing them on a game like tonight against Chelsea, you sort of almost take a bit of personal pride in that. That I was there, I saw them when they were just a teenager, and I've seen their game develop. It's one of the pleasures of being a football fan, really, of being able to see young players develop and grow into established first team players. And it looks like, because of Category 1 status, and it's been a big year for those Forest youngsters coming up against better teams regularly, and finding, I think, it pretty tough first and having to learn quickly what it's like to be able to compete against these players. But Forest will absolutely benefit from that, and those young players will benefit from it, and they'll really benefit tonight from being able to play in front of a lot of supporters, because that's a big difference. Playing when nobody's watching is one thing. Playing when you've got paying spectators, that's another. So it's a big opportunity for them tonight, and great for those fans that go down to get to see young players, and you can pick out the ones that you'll be cheering along in the first team in hopefully not too long.
Yeah, I mean, you do read the reports, and there are a few names that crop up a few times, and I suspect you're right, we will see a few of these lads in the future in the first team. So do go down and watch if you can. I think we'll leave it there for this week. So thanks everyone who's watched along and commented. And if you enjoyed it, as ever, do like, subscribe, and give us a good review, as it does definitely help us. Mikey, thank you very much. I know you've got a dash.
Thank you very much for asking me to come on. Really appreciate it. Nice to chat with you, David.
And you, Mikey.
Yes, thank you very much, David. Much appreciated as ever. Do join us again soon. And hope everyone enjoyed it. And we'll be back perhaps on Thursday if I plan something. I haven't even thought about it until I literally just said that. Otherwise, we'll be back this time next week.